So our next two presenters, are just, I've known them both for a while, and I think this one is just so important because when we're talking about exactly what even Stephanie was talking about, all the speakers we heard before her, all the speakers we heard yesterday, some of this stuff is really, really uncomfortable. And some of you might be, depending on your lens, either you could relate, maybe you don't, maybe there's that shame that's in your body that's saying, oh, wow, our people actually did this? And I just remember too about just being on this journey through the work I'm doing, and it's because I do a lot of work in Indigenous communities, and coming into their space as a settler, it's always interesting because I'm always like just hearing their stories, and exactly what Stephanie said, that's what I'm getting tired of. It's like when I go into other spaces, and it's that, well, why can't they just get over it? And so what I'm really encouraging each and every one of you to do, especially after hearing about these stories, or any of the stories that we've done today, you have the power to change people's perspective. And sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes you just want to shut down that conversation. And you wanna say, you know what? I don't wanna hear it, but then I come from a perspective too, giving the benefit of the doubt to people and say, maybe they just don't understand, they're ignorant, and I'm not talking ignorant in a bad way, just, because it's 80% of us is like, we don't know what we don't know. So if somebody mentions it to you, then it's up to them to choose, and you still might get that perspective, because trust me, I was sharing that story yesterday of being in these spaces where I'm constantly getting shut down and things like that. And sometimes I just want to give up. And I said, nope, because if you continue to have that open dialogue, talk to people, do that seeking to understand their perspectives, sometimes your learning experiences will come out. But what happens if we just stand by? What are we doing? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's that enabling behavior. And yeah, and creating that belonging is not somebody coming in, and I can't remember if it was somebody who said it, like everything's blending together, but somebody had said something around belonging. Like belonging isn't about, like if I want to belong somewhere, I used to think belonging was to change myself so I would belong. That's not what it is. And now I'm bringing myself to the table and saying, well, you don't like me, whatever. Don't care. Well, sometimes. So, yeah, and you know what? It's about embracing the tension. So this is what our next two presenters are going to be talking about, is embracing this tension through different perspectives. So, our first speaker, she has been a pivotal thing. When you're talking about accountability, she has always held me accountable. She calls me out on my stuff, and she has been an absolutely awesome mentor to me. I actually met her through a mentorship program I was part of, and she's just become a very, very good friend of mine too. So please, let's welcome, oh, wait, oh, geez, come on. There we go. So please welcome Irma Vartinen. Woo!
When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flag, gonna drown 'em out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to
introduce is that I met her. We were both presenting at a World Diversity and Inclusion Conference. And you know how sometimes she's one of those people, I know you keep hearing me, like, we just instantly connected. And it was really true. Like her and I don't remember what we said, but I just remember I said, I need to meet that woman. And it was just, we just instantly connected. We worked on another project together. Just, you know, like a bunch of us have been working on some projects together. And it's my pleasure to welcome, let's see if I can get this right now, Betty Marturi.
We are a chosen generation. We've been called for to show His excellence. Yeah, all I require.
Thank you. Okay. So now I will pass it off to Irma here to start this off. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irma Vartanian, and I'm an immigrant. I moved to Jogjoguet, otherwise known as Montreal in Quebec, 2 years ago. And since then, I proudly and humbly call the unceded territories of the Ghanaian Gahaka people home to me. Since yesterday, we have been discussing about judgment, how we judge, how we shouldn't be judging, how we need to hold ourselves accountable like we do to others. But the thing is, all of us, we judge according to people's words, according to their behavior, and according to their actions. But we judge ourselves according to our intentions. So I judge you according to what you say to me, but I judge myself according to my intentions. And if there is a misunderstanding, if there is a misinterpretation, I would say, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to sound condescending towards you. I didn't mean to sound like I'm excluding you. I didn't mean to sound like I am considering you as less. But the truth is, we all humans don't give that much importance to words as much as we give importance to our feelings, how that impacted us. And since yesterday, all the stories that we hear, it's all about people's feelings, how they have been impacted. And this is why awareness is important, so that we realize how we are coming across. We cannot control how people perceive us. They perceive us the way they want, but we have that awareness that we can control how we're coming across. So it's important to make people feel intentionally inclusive. Now, sometimes immigrants are asked the question, where are you from? I don't mind that question. A lot of immigrants don't mind that question because they think that, oh, this gives me the opportunity to share my story, where I'm from, and I get to tell them my story. But not everyone thinks like that. I know some of you ask me where I'm from, and I don't mind. So don't feel guilty. But for some people, like for example, people from Russia who live here, and when you ask them, they really feel awkward. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. You're just asking. But the point is, sometimes some immigrants take it differently. And that's what I'm raising here. It's also important to empathize with people. How about if you moved to another place and you're part of a team and you're there trying to make a point, and all people notice is your accent. And they're like, oh, you talk English well, not bad. But that's not the point. I'm trying to make a point here, okay? So it's also important to take all these into account and be flexible and adaptable to the situation. because not all situations are alike, okay? Tension is already something that is hard. Add to it the cultural diversity, that makes it even more challenging, unless we know what we're talking about when we talk about culture. So if we ask what culture is to some people who were not present at the conference, the first thing they would say to you is, oh, culture, well, it's about language, it's about the cuisine, it's about the folkloric songs or folkloric dances, it's about the art, the music. Yes, that's all part of it, but that's only one dimension. There's also social culture, and each one of us belongs to at least 15 to 20 different cultures at once. You have gender, you have sexual orientation, you have age, generation, profession, physical features. All these we belong to at the same time, and they are subgroups of cultures. And then we have our personal culture. That has to do with our values, our upbringing, our personal experiences, our exposure to different mentalities, and all of these together make up how we communicate with people and how we behave. Okay? For example, I was brought up in Lebanon. And Lebanon is in the region one of the most, if not the most, extroverted country. So according to the 2022 statistics, Denise, I know you don't like statistics, but it is the most extroverted country. And for those of you who met me, you know that I'm an introvert, or you can tell. So I'm not a typical Lebanese at all. I'm also Armenian. And if you meet an Armenian, I tell you, in the first 5 minutes, they tell you that Armenians are the first nation, as a nation, to have become Christian in 301. They are a nation who went through genocide in 1915 by the Ottoman Turks. And then they would tell you that Charles Aznavour, who happens to be a very famous singer, he's Armenian. So I'm not a typical Armenian either. However, when I came to Canada, I did realize that it somehow aligns with my communication style, because I am direct, but I'm also friendly, and I prefer collaboration over competition. So it feels really comfortable for me. Now, I am one of millions, okay? How would you know how to talk to any immigrant? There is no one single manual, and we're not alike. However, you can use your cultural intelligence to become culturally more competent. And that is really about the awareness of and the sensitivity to the differences in perspectives, in communication style, in behavior, and in mindset. So there are no cultures that are the same, none. And there's no culture that is better or worse than another. They're just different. Some might look weird to you because you have not been exposed to it, but they're not weird, they're just different. And the more you are culturally competent, the more open-minded you are gonna be, and you're gonna realize that your culture is one of many. And you're gonna realize that according to the situation, when you have an open mindset, you're gonna know how to behave. You don't need a manual, okay? Once you have that open mindset, wherever you go, whoever you talk to, you'll be able to handle the situation because you have been exposed to the idea of the differences, to the idea of the diversity. No matter what you do, even if you become flexible, even if you become adaptable, one thing's for sure, you have to stay authentic to who you are. Because with authenticity, you're gonna build trust. And it's only with trust that you're gonna be able to build rapport. And remember, people everywhere are forgiving and accepting of people they like. And they will hold you accountable for the smallest mistake you make when they don't like you. And that's human nature. So try to build those bridges, try to build those rapports, and try to be out there and not be scared of anything that is different than you. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Almer. That was awesome, and I'm just going to build upon what she has been talking about. But before I start, I just was reflecting on Denise. You know, if you had to do a social network diagram, all of us would come back to you. And I've been amazed, absolutely amazed, by the quality of the presentations that have been made since yesterday and today. They are completely impactful, very impactful. And it just, I just marvel, but that's a conversation for another day. As you heard, my name is Betty, and I'm an immigrant as well from Kenya, and Kenya is in East Africa. And I had the fortune of coming to Canada, and I've lived in different parts of Canada, but I've called Saskatchewan the home and the homeland of the Métis people my home for the last 30 years, where I've had the privilege of, raising my children and working and really enjoying life. I'm just going to build on the conversations that we need to have, and they'll integrate most of what we have heard since yesterday. The presentation that started with Chief Leanne Joe yesterday, talking about the values that we hold and saying, contextualizing and positioning herself with the values that she carries. And I found that very impactful because truly we've been having value-based conversations. And one of the things that provides such kingship to me with the indigenous people and everyone else who has spoken is because we come from a value base. And there's a value that hasn't been talked about a lot, and that is spirituality. And I'm going to pick up on that. Because again, when we talk about our diversity, yes, I have visible diversities. Visible identities that I'm a Black woman, African origin, and I'm a mother, I'm an executive coach, I'm a leader, and I wear all of that. But it is in the intersectionality of all those identities that I have to truly own. And I think Candy talked about that and said that she cannot really be defined by the fact that she comes from a specific area of the world, because even within our own ethnic communities, they can be, just as oppressive. And I have faced that as well. So it is very hard for us to self-define who we are and not accept the identities that have been imposed on me. So before I move on to my presentation, I just wanted to bring this dimension. It's because my faith really does define how I see the world. Yes, I've lived in different countries, I have very many experiences, but my faith, and as we talk about religious or faith, I talk about more faith because it's a relationship with our higher power, with our Creator. That is what defines my perspective, and that perspective comes back to shared humanity. And we've been talking about interconnectedness, and I really appreciated what Alex had to share in terms of framing this conversation as complex adaptive spaces, right? When we can elevate the conversation and say that we are in complex adaptive spaces. So in that space, we need to again, enter that conversation from a very collaborative mindset and from a very inclusive mindset and from a very curious place. That is how we can actually be able to adapt and be agile. So my presentation about embracing that tension goes to, oops, I'm going backwards. Goes to a model that I created that I use a lot in terms of helping build bridges, helping hold attention. We don't live in a world that is either or. It's either this way or it's this way. We talked about seeing things as a continuum and sometimes holding in our head the tension of what we think is right and what someone else thinks is right. Because if we don't hold that tension, then that is what is bringing the polarized views that we are seeing, especially from the South, where there's hatred, there's lots of tension growing, brewing, and it's actually going to come to a head if we don't get into these spaces with the reality that we have to hold that tension of I don't have to believe everything someone is saying, but I need to open my mind, and then going back to the openness of your mind and the growth mindset. And Elder Marianne completely knocked me off today. I have to say, I honestly was so touched by your presentation about how you can relate to the anger of colonization and your lived experience and what has the intergenerational traumas that have come as about, and yet hold a warm, welcoming stance to the new immigrants. Go as far as to go and engage with the Ukrainians so that you can hear their stories. Now that is a sophisticated mindset. That right there is a sophisticated mindset and way of being. In terms of, yes, I can feel my anger, and I feel it, and yet, these other settlers, there's nothing that they did wrong. The policies of the country are inviting him here, and I want to learn. So thank you so much for modeling what I felt was the tension that we need to hold and the space that we need to hold for each other. Because in this room, and I was, walking yesterday, from this space to the hotel, and I was telling Shanta, we are like minds. We are all here because we are kindred spirits, right? Where are the people who are not thinking like we do? Where are those people? And why are they not here? And in the work that I do, I work across the country, especially with healthcare leaders. And there's a lot of turmoil in those spaces, lots of turmoil in those spaces. And how do you create a space where someone even wants to listen to the business case or to the human the case of having this conversation? And that's where we go to awareness. We have to be able to build our own awareness of our own triggers, of our own biases, and I think we heard a lot about yesterday. When I'm coming to a space, like we started each morning with intentionality, with a sense of how am I entering there, we also need to really understand and own our own biases and own the love and light that Chief Leandro always talks about. I've never seen a space where love and light fails to work. That has never happened. And that's the reason why I tied it to my spirituality, because I believe if I can take on my higher self and bring that into a space, I am going to make change. Maybe not big change, but a ripple and a connection that will manifest and have fruit at a later stage. So thank you, Chief Leandro, because I do believe in the power of love and light. So that awareness, who you are being, and we've talked a lot about being, who we are being is really that awareness. And when you're holding your own awareness, can you be curious about someone else's awareness, about your situational awareness? Who is in that space? How are you aware about the history and the context? And, we've talked about really learning the history and the context of the space that you're in, because we are situated in space and time, right? I may have been born in Kenya, have traveled quite a bit. I live in Saskatoon. I come to to Victoria and quite a bit. I have always to be conscious about space and time and how am I showing up in those spaces. Then I need to go back to align to who am I? What are my values? What are my principles? And again, being anchored in that and knowing what your values are is important. In as much as you want to invite and make space for other people's values, I think it's very important that you ground yourself in yours. And if you see that your value does not align with the vision that we want to co-create, then it's time to challenge yourself around how is this value serving others and our shared humanity. But I think it's important for us to be grounded in our own values and know the values that do not change and the values that are flexible, right? Because if you're not, then it will be, you'll be kind of set in torrents and you might not have a way to back how you've evolved, how your perspectives have been shaped by your history, the surroundings, and everything else. How does that align with you? How does that align with the future that we want to co-create? And again, I'm going to quote Chief Leanne, because we talked about, it's about the generations. It's about the people who haven't even been born. I'm very invested in that mindset, by the way, because I'm a mother of 3 children. And all of them were born, 2 were born in Canada and 1 in the US. And I always think about the future that I'm going to leave for my children and for my great-great-grandchildren. And this future, I truly, truly pray that it will be one that is more beautiful, that can contain the space for everyone to flourish. And that is what I'm invested in. And that's why I talk to leaders, because they do have a huge influence on the social spaces they're in. Organizational leaders, that's a huge social environment that if we shape the leaders in organizations, they are the ones that are shaping their communities as well. So again, that is what I'm invested in. When I think about the future, I think about when I'm 80. When I'm 80, what is it that I'll be looking back on and proud that I did? What are the decisions that are going to really say, yes, I stood on those decisions? It was not just for me, it was not just for my family, but it was for the community that we are bringing up, whether it is your home community, whether it is you in your organizations, or the wider community. But that is what is called wisdom. It's not just you, and of course, I know that I'm talking to kindred spirits. It's about the collective good. That's what brings flourishing. It's not just individual, because if one community is flourishing over the next, you'll not have collective flourishing. And you're not actually going to enjoy a good life. So how do you then align with those values of not just today, but we've been hearing of two-eyed seeing. And two-eyed seeing is struggling between the future, the present, and the past, or between 2 cultures that you need to kind of find a middle way. So that is where the alignment happens. And then the last one is activation. How do we activate? How do we actually take action? I know that today we've had so many ideas. Yesterday we had great ideas. But at the end of today, I want to synthesize, and thank you so much for creating that space of synthesizing and taking action, because it can be overwhelming to go with all these ideas and there's nothing to action at the end of the day, right? And when whether you're having a conversation with someone, how do you actually sit back, create yourself time for reflection? Sorry. I know. Am I going backwards or forwards? There you go. Sorry about that. I give away the thunder, but I'm sorry about that. But I encourage us in all conversations when we are opening these spaces, and I think Irma just talked about that, you go with empathy, go with curiosity, really explore the people's stories, people lived experiences, navigate their ideas. I mean, I'm one person who lives in the future. I love the past, I honor the past, but I really like to ideate. I really like to get creative ideas. Otherwise, we get stuck on where we are. And I don't think that I get people unstuck. That's what I do for a living. You know, get unstuck and move into the future that you desire. So how do you ideate? How do you create that space to ideate? And ideation comes with end. You do not shut down people's ideas. You always say, yes, that's a really interesting idea. And this is what I think about it. Yes, that really intrigues me. And this is what I think about it. And then at the end of it, take one or two ideas that you can really put in action. Because in as much as we're here, and thank you so much for the privilege of being here, Denise, I really have so many things to action from every conversation. It's either something I'm going to reflect on and to change my mindset, because that is where transformation happens. If you just do things without truly challenging your assumptions and say, why did that hit me hard? Why did that really destabilize? And yesterday I was quiet because I was really processing a lot. And I wanted these conversations to be transformative. And encourage the people that you are engaging with also to really take time to say, what has gone below the waterline that is destabilizing my way of being? I don't want to come. I flew here 5 hours and back, and I'm sure when we are being catalysts of authentic conversations, we don't want to have a conversation that doesn't have impact. So how we show up, the questions we ask, our way of being, embodying love, holding love and light, and really asking the individuals, what is the one thing? What is the one thing that you're thinking about? What is the one thing that you put into action? It is a work in progress. We are all works in progress, but let's keep each other ignited, passionate, as we do this work of transforming our culture. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks to Irma and Betty for that great presentation.